Most players believe they stop improving because they hit a limit, a mechanical limit, a reaction limit, a talent limit. They assume there is a ceiling somewhere above them that they simply can't reach. That assumption is comforting because it means nothing is wrong with how they play, only with how far they can go. But most plateaus don't come from limits, they come from comfort. Comfort is the real skill ceiling, and it's invisible while you're still inside it. Cover doesn't feel like stagnation. It doesn't feel like laziness. It doesn't feel like fear. It doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like control. It feels like being solid, like being composed, like being disciplined. It feels like you finally figured something out, and that's why it's dangerous. Most players don't ask, am I improving? They ask, am I losing less? Comfort answers that question very well. You lose fewer embarrassing rounds, you avoid the situations that feel volatile, you stop getting blown up in obvious ways. Your losses become quieter, cleaner, easier to explain. That feels like growth, but growth isn't defined by how little goes wrong. It's defined by how much new information you can survive. Comfort reduces information. Comfort is what happens when your game stabilizes around what already works. Not what challenges you, not what exposes gaps, but what keeps outcomes predictable. Predictability feels like progress, because unpredictability feels like failure. At a certain point in competitive games, players stop chasing improvement and start managing risk. Not consciously, quietly. They begin filtering their decisions through one question: will this make me uncomfortable? Not, will this make me better? Comfort reframes that question into something more respectable. Is this necessary? Is this optimal? Is this worth the risk? That sounds like smart questions. They're also how growth gets negotiated away. Comfort doesn't remove effort, it redirects it. Instead of solving hard situations, you get better at avoiding them. Instead of resolving pressure, you get better at disengaging. Instead of committing to outcomes, you get better at staying safe. This looks disciplined, it looks mature, it looks like good decision making until nothing changes anymore. This is why players plateau while feeling capable. They aren't failing, they are functioning. They can win games, they can explain losses, they can hold their rank. Nothing feels broken, which means nothing demands change. Comfort creates a loop. You rely on familiar patterns, those patterns reduce volatility. Reduced volatility feels like stability. Stability feels like mastery. But stability without expansion is just repetition. And repetition without pressure doesn't create adaptation. Rank modes reward this more than people realize. Rank does not reward growth, it rewards survivability. It rewards avoiding collapse, avoiding embarrassment, avoiding extremes. You can climb far by minimizing exposure, by never putting yourself in situations that force resolution. Comfort thrives there. This is why players often say, I'm playing well, I just can't break through. What they mean is, I'm functioning inside a system that no longer challenges me. The game stopped asking new questions because you stopped asking new answers. Comfort often disguises itself as discipline. This is the most dangerous version of it because discipline is respected. Discipline is praised. Discipline is what strong players talk about. So when comfort wears discipline's clothes, it goes unquestioned. But discipline is about commitment. Comfort is about containment. Discipline chooses a direction and accepts the costs. Comfort avoids costs by keeping all options open. That flexibility feels intelligent. It's also expensive. When you refuse to commit, your brain never resolves anything. Every situation stays provisional, temporary, unfinished. You move on without closing the loop. That's not adaptation, that's deferral. Deferred decisions accumulate, and the weight doesn't show up immediately. It shows up later as hesitation, slow reactions, late confirms, panic choices, not because you don't know what to do, but because you're managing too many unresolved states. Comfort creates cognitive debt. This is why calm is often misread. People confuse calm with mastery, but calm can come from two places. One is resolution, the other is avoidance. They look identical from the outside, but only one produces growth. A comfort based calm comes from never entering the storm. Mastery-based calm comes from having resolved it before. One is silence because nothing is happening. The other is silence because the answer is already decided. Comforted players often look composed. They don't flinch, they don't scramble, they don't overextend, they also don't threaten. They don't force adaptation, they don't demand answers, they don't collapse the game onto the opponent. The match drags, time passes, nothing changes until suddenly it does. And when it does, it feels unfair. That's the moment comfort fails, not gradually, abruptly. Because comfort only works as long as the game stays inside no boundaries. The moment something breaks that boundary, there is no foundation underneath, just habits that were never tested. This is why players say, I was doing fine until what? Until the game stopped respecting your comfort? Until the opponent forced a resolution you never practiced surviving? Until uncertainty returned? Comfort reduces exposure to failure, but failure is where information lives. When you avoid failure, you avoid feedback. And when you avoid feedback, you stop evolving. This doesn't feel like stagnation at first, it feels like refinement. You're tightening things up, cleaning mistakes, removing obvious errors. That phase is real, but it ends. And when it ends, comfort takes over. The danger is that comfort feels earned. You worked to get here, you suffered through early chaos, you endured messy losses, you cleaned up your game. Why would you go back? Why would you re-enter uncertainty when you finally feel in control? That logic makes sense. It's also the exact point growth stops. Strong players don't grow because they are uncomfortable being uncomfortable. They grow because they don't confuse comfort with progress. They know comfort is a signal, not of mastery, but of stagnation approaching. Comfort isn't the absence of stress, it's the absence of demand. The game stops demanding anything new from you once you stop demanding anything new from yourself. This is why improvement often feels close but never durable. You touch something new, then retreat back to what works. You flirt with risk, then stabilize again. You sample growth without committing to it. Comfort becomes the default. Over time, this shapes identity. You start describing yourself as solid, consistent, fundamentally sound. Those aren't lies, they're incomplete truths. They describe how well you maintain equilibrium, not how well you expand it. Comfort rewards maintenance. Growth requires collapse, not emotional collapse, structural collapse. The collapse of old solutions that no longer scale. Comfort prevents that collapse, and by preventing collapse, it prevents rebuilding. This is why some players improve faster by losing more, not because losing is good, but because they stayed exposed long enough for the game to teach them something new. Comfort cuts that process short. A comfortable player learns slower not because they are worse, but because their environment is quieter, less pressure, less consequence, less information. The signal to noise ratio drops to zero. This is also why watching replays can feel productive without changing outcomes. You see the answers, you understand what should have happened, but understanding lives comfortably in the mind. Execution lives under pressure. Comfort ensures those two never meet. Comfort doesn't stop learning entirely, it slows into a crawl. So slow it feels like progress. That's the illusion. Players inside comfort often say, I'm one adjustment away, but comfort is what prevents that adjustment. Because adjustments introduce instability. Instability threatens the control you work so hard to build, so you delay it. Just one more session, just one more rank, one more confirmation that things are stable. That confirmation never comes. Eventually, comfort becomes identity. You don't just play it comfortably, you defend it, you rationalize it. You dismiss anything that threatens it as unnecessary, risky, or inefficient. That's when growth fully stops. The most dangerous thing about comfort is that it doesn't feel like fear. Fear is obvious. Fear announces itself. Comfort whispers. It tells you you're fine. It tells you you're close. It tells you not to overreact. Comfort doesn't say, don't grow. It says, not yet. And not yet is how improvement gets postponed indefinitely. Every plateau you've ever hit was preceded by a period of comfort. Not confusion, not chaos, comfort. The game felt manageable, your decisions felt controlled, your losses felt explainable. That's the warning sign. Comfort is not the enemy of beginners, it's the enemy of intermediates. It shows up after competence, after familiarity, after survival. That's why it's so hard to notice. Beginners are overwhelmed. Advanced players are exposed. Intermediates are comfortable. That's where most people stay. Comfort tells you, you've arrived. Growth requires believing you haven't. Until comfort is broken, nothing new can be learned. Not because you aren't capable, but because the system you're operating in no longer produces information. Comfort is not a moral failure, it's a structural one. And it's the real reason most players stop improving, not because they can't go further, but because they stop letting the game push them there.